The summer I learned to bake bread in Grandma's sun-warmed kitchen began with the pale hum of the old radio and the smell of warm butter. I was 10, the year the cicadas stitched the day together with their dry sound, and the kitchen felt like a harbour against the glare outside. Flour dust drifted in the air like a fine, shy snowfall, settling on the back of my neck and the cuffs of my shirt. Grandma stood at the table, her apron smeared with a memory of many meals. And she let me climb onto the old wooden stool that creaked in a way that sounded almost like a greeting. The bowl in front of us wore a crescent of sunlight, and the yeast fizzed in the water as if it remembered how to wake the world with its tiny, patient breath. "Patience," she said, not looking up, as though patience was something one could measure with a teaspoon. Her voice had that soft, weathered tone that comes from years of listening to rain tapping the roof, to the clock's slow, deliberate ticks, to the quiet confessions of a room full of hungry mouths. I watched her hands first, thick with the work of a lifetime, wrists weathered by wind and tide and the turning of dough. She kept her nails neat, like she kept her promises, kept unshowy and true. She shaped the flour into a mountain on the table, then pressed a hollow into its peak and filled it with warm, milky water and a little sugar. The yeast came alive with little pop sounds, as if tiny boats were waking in a harbour of sweetness. The air smelled of something that was almost holy in its simplicity. The tang of yeast, the sweetness of butter, the warm, sleepy scent of flour. Outside, the world lay in heat and brightness, but inside we moved with a slow rhythm that belonged only to us. Grandma's hands moved in the air with the rhythm of rain on tin roofs, patient and certain, as she added salt, a drizzle of oil, and then the flour. She turned it and folded it. "Like folding a letter to someone you love," she told me once, when the dough resisted. I was not sure what love had to do with bread, but I sensed it in the way she coaxed the lump into a smooth, soft globe that yielded to her touch. I breathed in the scent of dough and a hint of sweetness from her wooden spoon, which carried a faint vanilla from years of scraping sticky sugar from its bowl. The window behind us framed a stretch of garden, a lemon tree lifting bright fruit toward the heat, a row of tomatoes, a trellis where a vine clung like a patient whisper. The day outside was loud with the sun, but the kitchen kept its own music, the sigh of the oven door, the gentle clink of a spoon against the bowl, the soft thump-thump of my heart in my chest as I waited for something to rise. Grandma braided the dough with quiet hands, guiding my clumsy fingers into the motion, teaching me to press, fold, and turn, not with force, but with a kind of trust. She spoke little of grand ideas, and when she did, it came in little, simple phrases that sounded like weathered wisdom, told gently to a child. "Bread rises because we do the work that keeps it alive," she said once, tapping the dough with a fingertip, as if to test its resolve. "It's not magic," she added, "but there is magic in the care you give another day." I did not fully understand, but the words settled in me the way bread settles into a warm chest after you've eaten too much of a good thing, soft, round, and quietly satisfying. We waited. We watched the dough puff against the sides of the bowl, proud and the kitchen filled with the soft, patient ticking of the clock, the distant rattle of a bike on the gravel road, and the constant, comforting hiss of the kettle left on the stove. Grandma checked the rise with a thumb pressed into the dough's interior and smiled, a small crease of joy forming at the corner of her mouth. "There, little one," she said, when the dough finally stretched, and looked back at us with a shy light in its centre. "That's right. Now we wait some more, and then we wait a little longer, for sweetness to settle in. In those moments, I learned what it meant to be part of a process larger than my own small breath. The bread did not hurry. It taught me the virtue of time, of giving something good space to become. When the dough was ready, we split it into 2 loaves, formed them with the care one gives to a fragile bird, and set them to rise again in a warm corner of the kitchen, where the sun's path lingered. The oven had a weathered glow to it, like a sunset trapped inside a metal shell. Grandma slid the bread inside and slid the door closed with a soft sigh that felt almost ceremonial. We waited, our ears turned to the oven as to a distant sea, and for a long moment the kitchen was full of nothing but the mouth-watering expectation of what would come. When the timer rang, a bell, in a tone that sounded almost like a small triumph. She opened the oven door, and the room filled with that first honest scent of baked bread, warm, slightly sweet, and so familiar that it steadied the room's breath. The crust was a shade of golden courage, the inside as soft as a whispered lullaby. We cut the bread, and the steam curled toward the ceiling like a friendly ghost. We smeared it with butter that melted into the heat, and I swallowed with a sense of ceremony, as if I were tasting the world for the first time and realizing it could be kind. That loaf was not a present, it was a promise. In the steam and the steam's sigh, I heard a thread that would follow me across years, the thread of care that binds people, the thread of quiet, unspoken agreements between kin. Grandma did not shout love into the room. She pressed it into the crust and into the soft crumb, where it revealed itself in the way the bread tasted when it met a hungry mouth. I learned in that patient hour that love is not only spoken, but kneaded into the everyday. It is the routine, threads of patience, the ritual of showing up with your hands open and your heart steady, the willingness to wait for something to become itself. In the years that followed, I did not always bake bread as gently as Grandma did, but I tried to carry that calm into other rooms I entered. The hospital wards where I learned to listen as much as to speak. The classrooms where a student's small triumphs mattered as much as any grand victory. The kitchen at the end of a long day, when the family gathered around a table to share the bread left warm on the plate. When I watch the kneading of dough now, in my own kitchen, I am transported back to that sunlit corner of her world, and a younger version of me feels the echo of her patience, an echo that teaches me to slow the pace of anger, to measure the weight of a decision by how it feels on the heart of another person, not by how loud I can be. Time, I tell myself with a soft, almost private ache, is a long, patient teacher. It takes away the loud things, the noise of youth, the impatience of certainty, and leaves us with the small, enduring ones. The sound of a kitchen clock counting out the hours of a life, the texture of a well-kneaded loaf, the gratitude that lingers in the space after a meal has ended, and the world seems to rest a moment longer than it did before. The bread I bake now bears the same shape of that first loaf, though the crust may be darker with years, and the crust's crackles tell of my own weather-worn hands. Yet the core is the same, a quiet ceremony of gathering, waiting, and sharing what we have to give. Sometimes, when the day's sun has gone pale, and a cooler breath slips through the window, I cup a warm slice in my palm and press it to my cheek, as though the bread could deliver a blessing straight to my bones. The memory doesn't shout, it hums, a soft, last. I am older now, and the world seems larger than the kitchen table, where I learned to love the rhythm of dough and time. But that afternoon remains a map for me, showing how a life can become, through small, unadorned acts, a steadiness that others might lean on when their own strength weakens. It teaches me that to give someone a loaf of bread is to give them a measured piece of the day's mercy, a reminder that nourishment comes not from abundance alone, but from presence and patience. So I bake, and I remember, and I am grateful. The grandma I carry with me is not only the woman who handed me a bowl and a spoon, but the one who taught me to measure life in breaths between rising and resting, in the gentle warmth of a room kept safe by care. If I am a softer, kinder man than I could have been, it is her script I follow. The script that tells me to keep watch for small miracles, to respect rhythm, to feed others not just with bread, but with the quiet, sure belief that they belong. Time may push us forward, but memory keeps pace with its own steady heartbeat. I rest more easily now with a plate in my hands and a memory at my side, the way a child might rest with a beloved blanket. And as the loaf cools on the rack, I lift the bread to my lips and taste the afternoon